Colt business was struggling. My relative was fighting for Texas independence against Mexico. Didn't have the weapons needed to win the battle. So he calls up Colt, let me design the gun. They made it. He got the first 2 Colt Walkers. He died a Texas hero, saved the company. Most expensive gun ever sold. That was the one that he actually had when he died. The other one, my family members has. I started not only by myself, but with nothing. We were counting change in the Taco Bell drive-thru. From that point to now, we've built a business that will do just north of $15 million. We didn't have hot water. I had a son. I couldn't make him take a cold bath. I would boil this pot outside and carry it in with these big mitts in the house. And I would dump it in the bath to make just the perfect warm bath for him. We would do that every night. In Luke, there's a story. The woman from Nain, she had lost her husband. Not too long after that, she had lost her only son. As this funeral procession is leaving the village, they're heartbroken. And at the same time, you have this other procession. This procession is Jesus. He had been performing miracles. When you're in that valley, there's going to be people around you that seem so much happier. He saw her and told her to stop crying. Easier said than done, right? But that's when he reached up, put his hand to stop procession and said, get up. The boy got up and gave him back to the moms. You have to have the faith, because in those valleys, that's where the biggest changes in my life happen, is in those valleys.
Imagine going from counting change to buy dinner at Taco Bell with no car and the power getting shut off, to building a $15 million company and owning 60 vehicles, including a Lamborghini and a luxury Prevost tour bus, in just 7 years. That's not a movie script. That's the life of today's guest, Alan Walker, a direct descendant of the legendary Texas Ranger who the Colt Walker pistol was named after, the same family that Walker County, Texas is named for. Alan went from being the black sheep of his family, who barely graduated from high school, sleeping in a tent and heating bath water and a crawfish pot for his son, to a highly successful entrepreneur, movie actor, university lecturer, and a man of deep faith. This is one of the most inspiring comeback stories we've ever heard. But before we start, we'd be very grateful if you'd like, subscribe, and share our episodes, as we're here to help as many people as possible via No Surrender Stories, and we'll get there much faster with your continued support. This is No Surrender. Thank you. This episode is brought to you by our partners over at Don't Trade It In. It's the best and fastest way to get top dollar for your car from the comfort of your home. Please visit don'ttradeitin.com today. I am here today with Alan Walker, and got a pretty interesting story to tell in just regard to how we met. I'll kind of kick it off with that, and then we'll jump right in. A buddy of mine from college, Eric, shoots me this text, and he's like, I was in Bora Bora and met this super interesting guy that has done all sorts of interesting things. He happens to be in Texas. You guys have to meet. And so I was like, okay, that's interesting. Very unique connection there. And I reached out to Alan, and within minutes of talking, we noticed we had some things in common. I was like, yeah, I got to have Alan on the show. Since then, I've tried to do some research on Alan. There's not a ton of stuff out there. So I think it's going to be great to have you here, have you tell your story, because it's pretty incredible. And yeah, with that being said, one of the things that Alan mentioned during our first conversation was that he owns 60 vehicles, and one of them is a Lambo, one of them is a Prevost bus, which, for those of you who don't know, a Prevost is like a nice tour bus or RV on super steroids, and so he mentioned that was, again, his favorite vehicle, and I was like, wow, very interesting. But yeah, another thing that hooked me during our first conversation was your last name and kind of the history there with it. So isn't Walker County, Texas named after your family, if I remember?
It is Walker County, yeah. The original Walker Texas Ranger is a relative of mine. And there's a lot of history in Texas, all the way to the Alamo and Texas independence. And the original Colt 45 gun was named after him. It was originally the Colt Walker. And over time, the Walker got dropped. But yeah, Walker County was named after him. Originally, it was a different Walker, and then they needed to change it for some history purposes, I think, that didn't sit well over time. And he was also a Walker, so they said, let's rename it after him. We already have all the signs. He was a famous Walker. So they left it Walker, but changed it to a different Walker. So that's how it kind of came about. But yeah, some neat history there with him.
Yeah, definitely. You kind of touched on something there. As far as the Alamo goes, I'm a son of the Republic of Texas. So we both have bloodlines that were
Yeah.
literally there at the Alamo. That was really interesting.
Yeah,
If
it's
you
super cool. It's something to be proud of. We're proud of our heritage here, and it's super cool to have that in your family and something to be part of for sure.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And speaking of the Colt, there was something you mentioned in our first conversation. So the Colt Walker, and then didn't your great, 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 however many greats, the same grandfather advise on the design of the gun or something like that?
Yeah. So the way the story goes, and I may not have this perfectly correct, but the way that I've read about it and what I remember is the Colt business was basically struggling. It was going out of business on their last leg, essentially. And my relative that was fighting for Texas independence at the time against Mexico didn't have the weapons that he thought they needed to win the battle. So he calls up the Colt company and says, "Hey, you guys going out of business. We need something different. Let me design the gun that we need. I'll send it to you. You build it. The Texas Rangers will essentially buy it." Long story short, they made it, shipped them out. He got the first two Colt Walkers that they made the day before he died in Mexico and ended up saving the company. So he died a Texas hero, saved the company, and a little bit of Texas history there. So Texas Rangers ended up going to Mexico, getting his body, bringing it back, and burying it by the Alamo. So that was kind of a cool ending to his legacy there. But had a neat history there with that gun. And you can see if you go to the Texas Ranger Museum there in Waco, right when you walk in, there's a big picture of him right there on the wall. So we have a lot of resemblance in our looks between me and him. That's where the resemblance stops. He's no Texas hero. He was a brave man. A lot of them were, and they did that for Texas. But yeah, that's a cool story that we like to tell.
Yeah, yeah, and those guns, so there were 2 of them. One of them's in that museum, and then one of them, is it still in your family?
The one of the Koch brothers, which are, I think they might have passed away recently, or one of them did, but one of them's a big collector of things like that. And he had bought one off of our family. I don't know exactly how much that sold for, but they were over $1 million. It's known to be the most expensive gun ever sold. And
Wow,
that was the one that he actually had when he died in
wow,
Mexico. And the other one of my family members has.
wow, wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
When you mentioned that in our first call, I was like, "Jesus, I didn't even know that a gun had sold for over
Yeah.
$1 million. That's wild."
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And you're 47 now? Is that correct?
I am 48 now.
48.
Yeah.
And your current company is Advanced Aquatics?
Yeah, so we have Advanced Aquatics of Texas, which was our original aquatics company. We also have branches around other cities. So we have one in San Antonio. It's called Advanced Aquatics of San Antonio. Same in Austin, here in Dallas as well. And then we also have some one-offs in other states that don't have necessarily their own branch or office, but that we do business in other states as well. So we have a holding company, which I work for, and some of our senior staff work under, but we manage all of the subsidiaries, the Advanced Aquatics of Texas, which is based in Houston. That was our original. And then all of the others, the San Antonio, Austin, Dallas, and all the other accounts.
And the companies are, didn't you say like 7 or 8 years old, something like that?
We're on our 7th year. Yeah, we just started our 7th year.
So in 7 years, you've gone from, were you a solo entrepreneur in the beginning? Did you start pretty much by yourself or?
Yeah, I started not only by myself, but with nothing. I didn't own a car. I didn't own a single vehicle. I had no money. We were counting change in the Taco Bell drive-thru. I mean, it was, when I say broke, I mean, the only reason we weren't homeless was my parents had given me a house that I was supposed to be paying for, but I wasn't, and I couldn't even tell you how long it had been since I'd paid him anything on that. We literally had nothing. And yeah, from that point over the next 7 years, I borrowed one of my brother's spare vehicles and I put some serious miles on that car, and they were so gracious and good to me. I remember he had a toll tag in that vehicle, and man, I was running up some tolls on that vehicle like crazy. And I'll never forget, I was at his house. I just happened to be there when the toll bill came in, and he opened it, and his wife was there, and he was shocked. They work within a mile from their house, so they don't run up tolls at all. And their monthly toll bill probably went from $40 to 400. And he opened it. He was so upset, and he was getting on to his wife about it. And I don't know, for whatever reason, it didn't click with her. And she was just apologizing for it. And I decided just to go with it because I didn't have the money to pay him anyway. So it's a funny story we tell now looking back, because we've evened up since then a little bit, but she took the blame for me and we ran it up. But yeah, from that point to now, I don't even know how many cars we have, but we've got a bunch. And in 7 years, we've built a business that this year will do just north of $15 million.
Nice, nice. Yeah, and that's kind of why I mentioned earlier, looping back around, because that's exponential growth,
Yeah.
from nothing to eight-figure revenue is very
Yeah.
serious. Can you talk more about how you went from nothing to where you are now? A little bit more about the
Yeah,
business?
sure. I was an entrepreneur at heart when I was born. I mean, as early as I can remember, I knew that whatever I was going to do, I was going to be in business. I wanted to have my own thing. I didn't want to work for other people. I knew that's what I was going to do. I was selling our neighbors. We grew up with a lot of people our same age on our street, and they bought everything in the world from us. So I feel so bad looking back at that now. We sold everything from friendship bracelets to hot dogs to baseball cards and any business we could think of. I mean, we would set up a business and we would go hit up the neighbors, and I was like, what now? What do we have to buy from you now? And they would keep buying from us. And I fell in love with it. Just those 2 or 3 customers that we had, I knew that's what I always was going to do. And one of the struggles I had growing up is, not only did I know I wanted to work for myself and not work for other people, but I also struggled in school. When I was in school, they didn't have a lot of tech programs. They didn't have a lot of other learning styles. It was basically you go to school, you listen to the teacher, do the lecture, you take a test, and that was it. And I couldn't learn that way. 3 seconds into a lecture, my brain is a million other places. So I didn't go to college. And I always tell people the only reason I graduated high school is my parents worked there. I'm pretty sure if they weren't there, I wouldn't have passed. And they don't admit to that, but I'm sure they had something to do with it. My dad was a head coach at the high school, and my mom also worked in the school district. And I don't want to put my parents in a negative light at all. They were extremely supportive and loving and grew up in a great home and great Christian home. We had a great life. My parents gave us way more than they ever needed to. But there was always a little bit of an expectation of the status quo of where we lived, what they did, and kind of the footsteps that we should follow. And of course, part of that was graduating high school and going to college. And I knew that that was not in my cards. And so that was always a little bit of struggle, just maybe a little bit of disappointment was always kind of known there, or at least that's the way I felt. And they would constantly try to help through friends and through our circles get me jobs out of high school, no college. They weren't great jobs, but they were trying to get me. I remember a custodial position at the school district, working nights. I mean, I was just the worst thing in the world I could think of. I wanted to be an entrepreneur. I'm not cleaning schools on the night shift. I'd rather be homeless than do those type of jobs or do any type of job that wasn't what I was doing. So that was another struggle, that they were just constantly trying to help me. They were trying to do what was best for me, but I wasn't fitting into that mold. My brothers, I have 2 younger brothers. They were growing up. They were kind of surpassing me in that status quo. They both went to Baylor University. They both graduated with their degrees, got the jobs. They're 2 weeks of vacation. They're 3-bedroom, 2-car, right? The whole status quo of what was to be expected. So I was always kind of the black sheep, and they've never called me that. But looking back now, we all kind of joke about it. That's what I was, and wasn't in a bad way. It wasn't nothing necessarily against me, but I didn't follow in any of the footprints that my brothers or my family had. So I had a lot to prove, and I wasn't proving it. And all I knew is that's what I wanted to do. And if I couldn't do it, then that's just the way it was going to be. I wasn't going to do anything else. So started doing businesses. I started all kinds of things. I mean, anything I could think of, I would do. We went through roofing companies. I had home improvement companies. I did pressure washing, even had a business for a little bit, delivering bodies to different places, from the hospitals and to the morgues and funeral homes. And it's everything, and literally anything, I would do it. And in each one of those, there would be a lesson to learn. And some of those lessons caused me not to have those businesses anymore. And in each one of those, I would learn more, and got to the point where I started this one, and I had learned so much over the course of a lot of failed businesses, a lot of struggles, and finally it all came together. and really grew and really took off. And here we are. So it's, I think if I would have gone the college route, I probably could have saved myself a lot of time and solved a lot of those issues earlier than I would have otherwise. But that was the price I had to pay for it. And part of getting to where I was at is not giving up and knowing my dream, knowing what I was meant to do, and willing to struggle to do it. I mean, there was times, and a lot of people didn't know this. I mean, I didn't have electricity at times. We didn't have hot water for almost a year. I had a son. I was basically raising my son from birth all the way through when he graduated high school. I remember taking a bath. I'd fill the bathtub up with cold water and didn't have any hot water, and I couldn't make him take a cold bath. So I had like a shrimp boil, like a big crawfish pot with propane. And I would boil this pot outside, and then I would carry it in with these big mitts in the house, and I would dump it in the bath. And I'd figured out the right consistency of how much cold water to make just the perfect warm bath for him. We would do that every night for him. And sometimes we didn't have electricity, and man, we would just turn it into to a camping. We would set up a tent by the fireplace and say, "Hey, we're camping tonight," and he loved it, and it's you just make the most of it. So there was so many struggles along the way, and still are. I mean, just because you get to a certain level. I mean, last night we had a pretty big issue come up in the company that I thought was going to be a short term, pretty big issue, and had an emergency meeting with our upper management. We all sat down late last night at our conference table. So is this what we're dealing with? And, what are we going to do about this? And the consensus was, and this has been pretty much the story my whole life, is we're going to praise God even through the storms. And we're going to know that we're going to have faith that there's going to be good that comes out of this. And we all agreed on that. And this morning, man, just started rolling in the positivity, the stuff that we never would have seen before. We kept our faith and knew that good things are going to come, even in the valleys. Yeah, that's kind of my story in a nutshell. A lot of struggles, still have them, but pressed through, had the faith, and stuck to what I knew I wanted to do and what I knew I was good at.
Wow. You covered a lot of ground there, and
Yeah, sorry about that.
no, it's all good. There's just multiple things you said that really hit home for me, especially the issues at school. I am dyslexic. It was just I hated it. Hated it so much that they would get me to school and I'd run all the way back home. And I've mentioned the story in other episodes, but yeah, it's very interesting how the school system is set up. It's not one size fits all, but if you're not in that normal kid spectrum, then you can have, and I'm sure there's plenty of people out there that have not really made much of their lives because they're labeled at a young age as not being a good student, and that for the rest of their lives, they just think, oh, I wasn't destined to do anything big, because they didn't fit the mold.
The entire curriculum and their entire mission of intermediate and high school was to get you through college. And what blew my mind was 60% of students go to college, 30% finish. Why are we focused? And I think they do a lot better job now. So I'll give a little bit of shout out to the school. But when I was there, it's like so much focus was getting kids prepared to go to college and get their degree. And it's 30% of people were doing that, are finishing that. So why are we putting 100% of the students through what 30% of people are going to do? And if exactly like you said, if you weren't in that mold, if you weren't going to do that 30%, then you were the trouble kid. You were the kid that wasn't going to amount to anything. And the truth is a lot of those kids that graduated work for people like me now.
Yeah.
It's kind of funny how that works out.
Yeah, absolutely. You mentioned just last night, it's the entrepreneurial journey is so crazy. And then you also mentioned faith, like when you're dealing with 8 figures in revenue, I'm in the same boat. We've been around or above, not above 8 figures to 9 figures, but we've been in that 8-figure range now for years. And a lot of people, they see a nice facility and they see nice cars and they see all these things and they make assumptions like, yeah, this guy's just made it, and it's the amount of stress that you have to be able to handle to get to the point where you do your first million in business in 1 year. For most people, I know there's the unicorn guys that have these incredible tech ideas, and ironically, Eric, the guy that I mentioned earlier, how we met, I know he worked his ass off on the one hand. On the other hand, in the software industry, and his business wasn't the type where he didn't have to work his ass off to get to where he was or anything like that, so I'm not trying to take anything away from him. On the one hand, on the other hand, these days there are stories of guys who it's almost like hitting the lottery. They come up with some unique set of code that turns into an application that they sell for an insane amount of money, or they raise hundreds of millions of dollars. But the kind of a common theme on this podcast is if you're not willing to work hard, then you probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur. And if you're willing to give up relatively easily, you shouldn't be an entrepreneur. And if you could go into a little bit more detail, I know you said you tried a bunch of different things, but how did you go from like all the things that didn't work to deciding on this advanced aquatics
Sure,
concept?
that's a good question. I talk about this a lot with my friends, and when people ask about like how you get into this, it's when you're an entrepreneur at heart. At least for me, it's I enjoy the industry we're in. I like the aquatics industry. I love water. We live close to water. When we vacation, we go to water destinations. Obviously, that's where I met your buddy in a swim up bar in Bora Bora. I love everything about water, so I enjoy the industry. But the truth is, man, I would be just as happy in anything else. I mean, if we sold out and tomorrow we opened a portable toilet company, I would be just as happy. It's the entrepreneurship is what I'm passionate about. The industry itself, it could come or go. But I do the one we're in. And how I got into that from all those others is I do have a little bit of background. I was a firefighter and a rescue swimmer for a little bit. One of the many jobs that I tried to force myself into being a regular employee that was unsuccessful, and did some water stuff with them. Had some training with them. Also, my dad, as I mentioned earlier, was a head coach at the high school. He built us a pool in our backyard when we were pretty young. Of course, he wanted to make sure we could swim, and he wasn't a swim coach, but coach is a coach, and taught me and my two brothers how to swim so we'd be safe in the pool. Well, the neighbors found out that we were building a pool and that he had taught us to swim. They're like, well, our kids are going to be swimming too. We teach them how to swim. And so he taught them how to swim. That turned into a huge summer business. Of course, my dad was off most of the summer as a teacher and a coach. So he started teaching swim lessons in our backyard pool in the city in the summers for about a month and a half each summer. And he would teach, man, it was from 8 o'clock in the morning till 8 o'clock at night, 12 classes a day, 10 kids in each class. And he was 120 kids a week. I mean, it turned into this huge thing to the point where we ended up getting in trouble from the city because we lived on a cul-de-sac. So it went from an occasional car to just massive traffic. So I don't blame the neighbors for getting upset at that. But then we branched out to other houses in the neighborhoods and in the city. And it turned into a huge thing. Ended up, he was making, I'm sure, more money doing that than he was coaching full time all year. So kind of grew up helping with that a little bit. And so that's when I realized there was a little bit of a business there with teaching swim. But the 3-year-old crying kids screaming in your face and not wanting to swim wasn't really my thing. It wasn't something I enjoyed doing, but I saw the business opportunity there. When my dad finally retired, told me I could have that business. And I did that for a little bit. But again, it wasn't really my thing, but I realized that if I took that and then took the other certifications that I had from the fire department, I had my CPR certification, had some other water certifications, training certifications, rescue certifications, that there was this whole other industry. I found out about lifeguards, and that, there's this whole thing where people hire lifeguards for water parks and for city pools and community pools, and started teaching lifeguard classes then I was asked if I could manage a commercial pool and provide lifeguards. Didn't even know that was a thing. So I was like, yes, I can. So we started managing that facility and cleaning the pool and offering swim lessons. And we were doing other events at the pool, and we were providing lifeguards. And that grew into that first pool that we had, grew into several hundred pools now. And I think we have over 500 lifeguards that work for us. So it's kind of how I got into there. But again, that could all change tomorrow, and I would be just as happy doing anything else if it was business related and entrepreneur related. So yeah, that's kind of how we got into that, and it's going strong. It's going really well.
Wow, yeah. So, one pool to hundreds of pools too, or hundreds of you said 500 lifeguards?
Yeah, we have hundreds of pools now that we manage, and they're all commercial pools. Some are water parks, city pools, community. We do a lot of community HOA pools, and so any kind of commercial aquatic facility, we take over management of them, and we do everything from the maintenance, the chemicals, the cleaning, the renovations, the repairs, the lifeguarding, the staffing, gate attendants, anything that the facility has, we'll take over and we manage the whole facility.
Wow. Wow. Very cool. Another thing you touched on when you told your primary story there is the faith, especially I think you used the words, they're kind of equivalent to it reminds me of wedding vows in sickness and in health, in good times and bad. You stay strong. Was faith with you from a young age? Was it part of your
Yeah.
family growing up?
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up, we were one of those families where every time the church was open, we were there. I grew up believing if we weren't there for Wednesday night supper, that was a sin. I mean, that's how much we were there. I mean, we grew up in a very conservative, very Christian home from my grandparents and my parents as well. And so that was a big part of our life for growing up for sure, and continues to be. And that's a huge part of success too, that it's the faith and understanding that in those valleys and those dark times and scary times, that's when you've got to have the faith, and that's where you find Jesus. That's what I believe, and I think in those times when you have that faith, that knowing that ultimately you're not in charge of that. That's easier said than done, but it's important. Not to have a mini sermon, but this is a story that I think about almost on a daily basis. In Luke, there's a story about the woman from Nain. She had lost her husband, and then not too long after that, she had lost her only son. And in that time, having no men in the home was pretty much a financial disaster. It was about as low as she could be. I mean, she lost her husband, she lost her son, and just had basically no outlook for life whatsoever of surviving, of finances, of food, or anything. And so in Luke, it tells us that while there, obviously, she's at the lowest she could ever be at with no hope for the future whatsoever. And they're in this funeral procession. And so the people of the village, they would bury the people outside the gates for sanitary reasons and smell, I'm sure, and whatever else. So as this funeral procession is leaving the village, of course, they're heartbroken and they're crying and they're sad. At the same time, you have this other procession that's coming from outside the gates of Nain coming towards, and this procession is the exact opposite. It's a procession with Jesus and his followers. He had been teaching and healing and performing miracles. And so you have these people that are just overjoyed with excitement and happiness and just so joyful, right? And so you have these two groups that are about to clash at the gate of this city that are exact opposites. And there's I think about this story almost every day because there's two main things that I get out of this story. It's when you're in this moment in this valley where there's no hope for the future, it seems like when you're in those situations that everyone around you is the exact opposite, which makes it even worse for you. And I don't know why that is, but when you're low, when you're dealing with stuff, it just seems like everywhere you go, everyone is so happy. Everyone's doing so good. Everyone's doing so great. And I can imagine that feeling when that funeral procession came out and they see this party basically coming in to the village, and they just, man, you talk about a clash of two opposite groups. And so I remind myself daily that when you're in that valley, yeah, there's going to be people around you that seem so much happier. But the key part of that story that you can't miss is when Jesus saw that, he had compassion and he stopped them. Of course, you remember the end of the story. He saw her and told her to stop crying, which again, easier said than done, right? She sees them and it's okay, yeah, sure, stop crying. But that's when he reached up and put his hand to stop the procession and said, "Get up, boy." And our little boy, I think. And so the boy got up and gave him back to the mom. So now you've got two groups of happiness. So, you know, the thing there is like, you've got to have the faith in the valley because that's where you're going to find Jesus. And there's going to be work done in those valleys that you did not expect. There was no way that was in her mind when she was leaving that city that she was going to run into that. And she was going to go back into those gates walking with her son. There's no way she thought that. But you have to have the faith, because in those valleys, man, that's where you're going to find him. And that's a lot of times, at least for me, that's where the biggest changes in my life happened, is in those valleys. So that's super important to me. And that's something that we try to live by.
That's awesome. Yeah. This whole show was born in the valley. I can't remember if I mentioned to you previously or not, but was going through one of those times where, and it wasn't that long ago, it's about a year ago, where it was like, I've described it as they talk about the light at the end of the tunnel. The only person that saw the light was me, and the size of the light was like 1 pixel, and it was there because of my faith. I've always said we didn't come this far to fail, and this in the automotive industry, which my businesses operate in, there's just been so many, of course, COVID did a lot of things to a lot of industries, but with the automotive industry, it was extremely, I'm sure you probably remember when used cars, they were like every night on the news, they were talking about how used cars were selling for more used than they did new if they were a couple years
Oh,
old,
yeah.
and so that was great as we peaked, but then we saw record depreciation in 2022, and then we set another record in 2023, and we expanded in early 2022 into this large facility just in time for everything to basically crash.
Yeah.
And it was the second time that I'd been through a similar situation. I lost a dealership. Ironically, it was called Benchmark Classics. The logo's on this table. I use this table for the podcast for a reason.
Nice.
Yeah. And yeah, that time I held on for a few years after the Great Recession started, and eventually had to make the call to shut the business down. But no surrender is my way of giving back even when I don't necessarily have extra money to give. Like you arrived here early today, and we had to meet in person for the first time just a few minutes before we started recording, not because I didn't want to meet with you more before we started recording. It was because I was literally sitting here talking about a deal, a pretty significant transaction that fell apart on us, and just kind of similar to the story you told about last night, the meeting you had to have due to the issue you and your team were facing. So this and it's interesting, we're a dozen or so episodes in, and the faith does come up relatively consistently. And it's great that you told that story because, that's one of many stories where Jesus did something miraculous on the one hand. So the story is powerful, but then on the other hand, the more you study the Bible and the more you study, especially the teachings from Jesus and what he did, the more faith you can have.
Mhm.
But as you also said, it's very difficult when you're in the valley because you're like, why? My faith is here and I'm 100% believer. Why then do I have to continue? Like when I think I'm starting to come up from the valley, why then do I end up going further down?
Yeah.
You know, that's
You just thought you were in the valley.
yeah. Then you feel like there's
Yeah.
like a hole in the floor of the valley, and there's a whole nother valley inside of the valley.
And sometimes the valley demands change sometimes. You've got to figure that out, right? It's either you're going through this for a reason, and sometimes that reason is that change needs to happen. And it's our job to figure out if it's time to change something or if it's time to push through, time to have faith. It's part of being an entrepreneur for sure, is having to make that decision and figure out what the right way to go is.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So another thing you mentioned to me in our first conversation was somehow you went from entrepreneurship to acting.
Yeah.
How did that come about?
Yeah, that's an interesting story. So I certainly never would have thought that I would be doing that. But having gotten to where we are with our success, one of the things that I feel led to do and that I enjoy doing is giving. And like you mentioned, I mean, this whole podcast was derived out of that. And we were really looking for an opportunity to partner with a foundation. We wanted to not just give, but we wanted to be part of something that we could participate in as well. I didn't, I think a lot of people get to a point where it's, oh, our CPA said we need to start a nonprofit and donate X amount of dollars a year. Okay, box checked, move on. That's not at all what we were trying to do. We wanted to basically find a foundation that we could partner with but also participate in a foundation that people were involved in and actually actively participating in the nonprofit or the foundation that they had. I had learned that a lot of these foundations were just tax reasons and boxes to check, and that's what they were supposed to do in their next level of success, and not at all what we were looking for. So we had gone through it. We're working with a group that kind of puts nonprofits and foundations with donors or people that are looking to be part of that. And they had sent us to a couple. We met with some famous people, some actors, some not famous people, and just different groups, and just none of them just were fitting what I thought we were looking for and what we really wanted to do with our time and our money. So we had finally gotten an opportunity to, I don't know if you've ever heard of Night Shyamalan.
Absolutely.
One of his first, probably his most popular film was The Sixth Sense back quite a while ago. But he does a lot of thriller, sci-fi with some twists at the end typically. They're like, we found the perfect one for you guys. It's M. Night Shyamalan. And I'm like, what's a Shyamalan? I had no idea. And I've told him this story that, I never heard of him before. And I kind of have anxiety. I don't like those kind of movies. I don't like jump scares in movies. I hate those things. I mute the TV when I think there's one coming. So not my type of genre typically, but they're like, they're having a dinner coming up in a couple weeks. They've invited you to go. They want to meet you. You should go there. Y'all can talk about their foundation. You can learn more about what they're doing. And I said, okay, well, we'll try this again. So we went there out to Philadelphia where they live, and they graciously invited us into their home and had a dinner with about 10 people, learned about their foundation. Long story short, he had a new movie he was about to start working on, invited us to be part of it. And just, wow, never even thought of that. He invited me and my son to be part of it. So we got to do that, and super cool experience. Fell in love, not so much with the acting, but the production side, I think is super cool. It's neat kind of seeing all of that come together, the magic part of the movie making business. So I really fell in love with that part of it. And we've gotten a few opportunities since then. We've done, me and my fiance, we're in this season of Grey's Anatomy. I filmed up in Canada. We did an interview with a vampire. We've got a Christmas movie coming out this year with Dean Cain, and just a lot of fun. I'm not going to get into acting. I'm not an actor, never will be, but love that part of it. I love the production. I love doing that. So it's just something it's an opportunity that's kind of arisen from giving. And it just seems like every time you do that, something comes back to, it's the way giving is. It's you give and you end up getting more back out of it than what you gave. So doing some really cool work with the Shyamalan Foundation. And in the meantime, we've gotten some opportunities to do some cool acting and some movie stuff behind the scenes too.
Awesome. Yeah, and to kind of take what you just said and run with it a little bit, the whole giving side of things, tithing, is what they call it in the Bible, and kind of to come full circle on the no surrender story. It was a lady, a Christian singer, actually, Amy Lord. She was our second guest on the show, who was involved. And when I pitched the idea of no surrender to her, I was like, yeah, eventually I want to do this. And she was like, Justin, do it now.
Yeah.
Do it now. Like,
Absolutely.
Start giving now, start having people on that can help other people, have them tell their stories. Do what you want to do now, even though you got to make the time to do it, and it's wild. You can see it. I don't know if they'll be able to see it in the cameras or not, but I've got a cross on my ring, and it's got an engraving. My wife got it for me recently, and she recently I got her a little cross necklace, because going through everything you go through as an entrepreneur, as we've already touched on, that faith, it's interesting how, in our case, the faith has gotten even stronger, even though the results we've been hoping for have eluded us. We will get to where we think we're gonna, a bad month is you're still making money.
Right.
And then oh shit, we have a terrible month, and it's we lost tens of thousands of dollars, and in one brand alone, and then another brand lost tens of thousands of dollars, But yeah, giving back. Tony Robbins is one of the things that he says often is you need to focus on giving more than you receive. Mm-hmm. And it's wild how, as you've kind of touched on too, things will change when you least expect it if you maintain that even when the times aren't good.
Yeah, absolutely.
If I remember correctly from our prior conversation, were you invited to lecture?
Yeah, so something I'm super proud of. Again, I didn't go to college. School wasn't my thing at all. And I was actually invited to do a lecture, which is just wild to me. That blows my mind that, here's this guy who, I don't want to say I'm against college, but I mean, I kind of am for most people. Look, the guy that's operating on me, I hope he went to school as long as you possibly can.
Yeah.
But a lot of people that go to college, I think, probably wasn't the right thing to do, but that's a whole nother soapbox. We can do that on a different podcast. But yeah, it's to be asked to teach anything at a university for someone who barely got through high school. It's something I'm very proud of. And I don't try to be a proud person, but it was a good feeling for sure, especially with my family. My father was in the school district, so was my mom, and my sister-in-law is a principal, and we just have a lot of educators in the family. And so being the black sheep because I didn't go the route of everyone else and then being asked to teach at a university was a pretty cool thing.
Yeah, and didn't it start out as just more of a speech or something like that? And
Yeah, I was a guest speaker one time and I just turned in the class voted at the end who was their favorite guest speaker. And it was me because I think I resonated some because I went there and I wanted to learn from them. I thought, what a great opportunity for me. I'm going to go to a university full of entrepreneurs that are way more educated than I am. So what a cool opportunity for me to go and learn. And I think that was a neat thing for them as well, because some of the feedback I got was a lot of the speakers were just going in, oh, look at me, and I'm so much smarter than you and successful than you. And I was going in just what I could learn from them. So at the end of the semester, they had voted me as their favorite speaker of the year, which turned into a much larger opportunity after that. It's a huge honor to be able to do that.
wow, I'm sure there's multiple lessons you teach over the course of the semester, but for the listeners or viewers who want to become an entrepreneur, or they are an entrepreneur and they think they're in a valley, what's the top 2 or 3 things that you would like to offer as advice to those people that are in a tough spot?
Yeah. So my two favorite things to teach people who ask that question, one is basically my style of business. We do a very relational based business. And what I mean by that is I'm a firm believer that the customer doesn't remember what you charge them. They remember how you made them feel. And that's all based on the relationship you have with them. So when I build relationships with our customers, that goes far beyond the sell or the contract or the job or whatever it may be. That protects us way past that point. So if I can build a relationship with a customer instead of focusing on the sell, then when I get the sell, I don't have to worry about what comes after that. For example, if I'm going to get a sell because I'm the cheapest person, I only get to keep that sell as long as I'm the cheapest person. And I get to keep it until the next person comes in and does it cheaper than me. And then I don't have it anymore. But if I get that sell because of the relationship, my pricing doesn't really matter that much. It becomes less important because I have the relationship. There's trust involved. There's a friendship involved. There's a much deeper meaning than just the sell. So when you run a business that way, and whether it's a ministry or whether it's a business or anything else in life, it all works the same. Now, when I sell, if I have a competitor that comes in and tries to undercut me, instead of them just going with the cheaper guy, instead they call me. They're like, "You're never going to believe this. So-and-so just came in and tried to undercut you." End of story. Like, I don't even have to worry about someone else coming in because I have the relationship. So in business, to me, relationships are so important. And we teach it in 3 different ways. We have a relationship with, number one, our staff. You've got to take care of your people. It's something that I focus on in my position, is taking care of the 5 or 6 people that directly report to me. They're the most important part of my business, and I build relationships with them. There was a time where I was traveling. I was out of the town. I was a long ways out of town. And one of my senior guys, kid had to go to the hospital. It was something very minor, wasn't a huge deal. He called and let me know about it. I changed our plans, flew back to where they were, went and visited them in the hospital. That's building a relationship with people, and that's showing your people that you care about them. And that's creating a bond that's going to build what you have with them for a long, long period of time. So when you have high turnover with a business, you're probably lacking that relationship. And so that's something that I don't have to worry about with my staff. I know they're here for the long run. I could close my business down today and say, "Hey guys, tomorrow we're opening up in Africa. selling portable toilets. Tomorrow, every one of them would be there, no questions asked, because of the relationship. So our staff is a third of that puzzle. The other one, of course, is our customers. Got to have relationships with them. We build a relational, we get to know them, we know their families, we sponsor their kids' sporting events, whatever it takes to build a relationship with them. And each one of them is different. And then third is we build relationships with our competitors when we can. I think that's one that a lot of people miss out on. A lot of times people don't want to have anything to do with their competitors. And my competitors don't scare me. They don't concern me. Some may do better than me. Most of them are not going to do better than me. But when you have good relationships with your competitors, I can tell you that one of my biggest source of new business is from one of my competitors, that they don't do a specific part of our industry that we do. And so every time they get that call, they just send it to me. And they're like, hey, we don't do it, but you need to talk to Alan. He does it. And they do a great job at it. And so we get a ton of business from our competitors because I have that relationship with some of them. Not all of them want to do it. Not all of them want to have a relationship, but the ones that do, it works out really well for you. So we try to focus relationally, whether it's with our staff, our customers, and also our competitors. So that's a big thing that I try to teach people early on is meet people, build relationships with people, no matter what they do or who they are. And so the other thing that I teach is it's along those same lines, but if you're earlier, maybe you haven't started your business yet, maybe you're way before that time period. One thing that I teach people to do is take a book and once a week, meet someone. Purposely try to meet someone new. Write it down, keep notes on them. It doesn't matter who they are. I mean, it could be someone, your server at a restaurant, but just real briefly get to know them, know their name. Is this temporary? What are you doing after this? What are your goals in life? Where are you going to be in 5 years? And make that contact with them and write it down so you can look back and remember this. And once a week, you do that. Once a month, it has to be someone of substance. And what that means is someone that's more successful than you, someone that's richer than you, someone that you think is smarter than you, but someone that has greater substance than where you're currently at. And those are a little bit more difficult. But when you make it your goal to do that once a month, to find those people, it's at the end of the year, you look back and you've got a book of 52 people that you've met. You're beginning to create that circle. And in that circle, you're going to have this book of people that's going to help you start your business. And when you start your business, you can go back, man, I remember this person I met that does this or does this. And when you call them up, they're going to remember you. You took the time to get to know them, to ask them a question that nobody's ever asked them. I was struggling. I was at the end of the week and I hadn't got my person. I'm a stickler on it. Like every week I have to have one. And I was struggling and I was driving around. I was like late on the last day and I wanted to get them. I didn't want to mess it up. So I go through the McDonald's drive-thru and I'm just struggling and I get up to pay the guy and I wasn't even thinking about it. I was just being kind. And he complimented my vehicle and I was like, oh man, I was like, what are you doing from here? What's after McDonald's, man? He's, well, actually I'm in college for fluid dynamics and studying water flow and just this big fancy thing that you wouldn't expect to hear from the guy at McDonald's drive-thru. And it's actually something that we use when we're designing and building water slides and water parks. And I was like, no way. I was like, dude, I got to talk to you. And right about that time, the car behind me honked. So I was like, dude, I'll be right back. I went back through, I ordered small fries, went back to the window. I was like, dude, man, tell me more about this. He's like, what year? Yeah. And I told him what we did. And he's like, so cool. Yeah, I would love to come see some of your projects. And that's not a position that I could hire. We don't do enough of that work. But man, what a nice contact to have down the road when I do have a question in that. I never would have found anybody that knew that kind of stuff. And he's going to go on and get an awesome degree in this stuff and be super smart. And I know him and he's going to always remember that contact in the drive-thru. And if I ever need to call him up, I've got his number. I know his name. I'll say, hey, remember me from the drive-thru? And maybe it'll never be anything. But man, when you get 52 of those a year, that's a good start. So even if you don't know what business you want to build or what your future holds, if you're an entrepreneur and you want to go into that's a challenge I give to people is start that book. Meet someone every week and every month, someone of substance that you can learn from and meet. And in the future, never know. But you've got your core group of people that you're starting to build. I think that's a cool thing to start with.
Absolutely. So that's a great challenge, especially these days. More and more people are becoming introverts than extroverts. What do you recommend? Like you mentioned that perfect example of how to meet somebody, but for the people that are sitting there that are introverts, so they don't have many friends, maybe they don't go to church. What are your recommendations for places to meet? Especially, the once a week, as you just said, can be a challenge. But how about the once a month caliber people where you're trying to
Yeah.
meet people up on higher levels? What do you have any recommendations as far
Yeah,
as that
sure.
goes?
So there's several avenues there. One that I do is there's a monthly entrepreneurial dinner. No, I'm sorry. It's twice a month. It's every 2 weeks. And you sign up for this online. It's an entrepreneur club and they do a dinner and they kind of group you based on kind of where you're at in the journey. If you're just starting out or if you're a million plus, you're 10 million plus or whatever. And you go to dinner and they'll mix them up a little bit so everyone's not the same. You've got some that are a little more successful than others so that you can meet people that can help. It's a great way. You go to dinner, you go to happy hour, you do whatever, but you go to these things and it's cheap. You go spend $20 on a dinner and you meet 10 other entrepreneurs and it's free basically. You're going to eat otherwise. So that program is free. There's entrepreneur clubs that meet socially at different things around town. I mean, you can go to there's a website of meetups and they do different groups and there's tons of entrepreneur clubs there. If you're not in church, you're not in college and you're not around a lot of people, join some of those groups. Go to dinner with 10 entrepreneurs. Talk to one of them. There you go. There's your one. They're going to introduce you to other people, and that's going to explode into other groups. Oh, come to this. Oh, you need to go to this event. Oh, you should come with me to this. And so, look, if you're going to be an entrepreneur, some of it's going to involve actually doing it because, like you said when you started this podcast, it was something you wanted to do, and you said someone encouraged you if you're going to do it because that's the difference between entrepreneurs and non-entrepreneurs. We're the ones that actually did it, right? So there's this illustration, about this fisherman that had the best fishing boat there was and the best fishing gear and just had everything he ever needed, the knowledge and everything, but he never caught a single fish. Why was that? And somebody always raised their hand. He never went fishing. That's right. That was the only difference between him not catching fish and catching fish was he never went. For entrepreneurs, we're the ones that actually do it. So there's great advice they gave you on starting the podcast is, hey, if it's something you want to do it. Do it now. With social media and the internet, man, I've built my business off of my phone. I have all the knowledge in the world in my pocket right now. And if you're not around groups, man, pull out your phone and find one. You can be having dinner with 10 entrepreneurs this week. There's plenty of opportunities.
You mentioned starting with nothing. That's one of the biggest challenges, right? So, any recommendations as far as if they have nothing, they have no money, no startup capital, any recommendations on the funding side of things, coming up with that money to get the ball rolling? Anything come to mind there?
Yeah, and I'm not going to be super helpful in that because I didn't do any funding and my company's debt free. I don't have any debt in my company whatsoever. And it's just not something I'm super familiar with. I understand it's like my situation is very unique and it's probably the hardest way to do it, but it is possible. And there's all these cliches with being an entrepreneur that you've got to work harder than everyone else, or all you got to do is put in more hours than your competitors putting in, and those things are true. But I think it's easier than that. I think it's about building relationships, and I built it slow at the beginning, but we doubled every single year since we opened our business or since we started. So it is challenging. When I said I had nothing, I mean, look, I did have a support system. I had a brother who was willing to loan me his car. I had parents who were willing to let me continue to live in a house I wasn't paying for. So I certainly had a support system there, but as far as cash or funding, I had none of that. I can remember the first few months I got that first pool, and these are commercial accounts, so you have to do the work, pay for it, invoice, and then at that point, you're lucky if you're 30 days out on payment. If everything goes perfectly, you're 30 days. Well, man, I remember that first job. We changed the pool pump, and I was probably $1,500 in on this job, and let me tell you, that's the most expensive $1,500 I've ever spent in my life because we were counting change at Taco Bell, and to come up with $1,500, I mean, that was so much money to me. And I don't even know to this day how I did that, but we were able to get it, and I probably put it on a credit card. Honestly, I don't even remember how I did that, but somehow we got it. And then those next 30, 45 days. I remember calling the customer, and you don't want to call, it's your first customer.
Yeah.
So you don't want to act like you're too desperate. But I was just like, hey, you seen that check yet? They're like, well, it's only been a week. It usually takes 30 days. Okay, no problem. Like 2 weeks. You seen that check yet? And it was tough. But I remember getting that first check in for $1,500. I was like, I'm rich. Yes, this is awesome. This is so good. It definitely was a slow start, but man, it just started exploding once we got the ball rolling. And so you had to save that, obviously, because you needed to do that again, except next time it was going to be a little bigger. And so it wasn't like I could just take that and go spend it. I had to not spend that too, because I had to build up some funds in order to continue to do that. And there were some times as we got a little bigger in that first year, we had commercial replasters. I remember when we replastered our first commercial pool. I mean, that's a $40,000, $50,000 job. And my father let me borrow enough to pay that contractor on that first job. And my brother let me borrow the next one. And so I did have some funding on a personal level, a little ways into it, but I had kind of proven myself at that point. I think they were a little more comfortable. I'm gonna be honest, I'm not going to speak for them, but I doubt they would have let me borrow it right off the bat. So I knew I had to figure it out, and I knew I had some stuff to prove. And it was important that I did it that way. But yeah, those first few months were, it was pretty tight for sure.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, yeah, I always like to end by asking, like I said, and you even told me right off the bat, even before we spoke, when we were texting back and forth, I was like, would you mind sending me your LinkedIn or, some social media?
Yeah.
I always like to ask, number one, if guests are willing to communicate with listeners or viewers. And then number two, if so, what would you say the best way to reach you is?
Yeah, they're welcome. I'm not big on social media. I've been told I have some pages out there from when I was younger that I haven't really used very recently, but anyone's welcome to email me. You're welcome to put that out there. Shoot me an email. I'd be glad to talk to anyone. I love doing that. I love having the opportunity to learn, and I love teaching too with what little I know. So I certainly, one thing someone asked me that I learned this when I was in junior high. We had a guy, his name's in Houston, he's known as Mattress Mac. And he's a furniture, just, this guy's done amazing with his furniture business. He's made so much money, and he's kind of a local celebrity back in Houston. But somebody asked him, and he came and spoke to our 8th grade class, and they asked, how did you learn how to do like all these cells into the accounting and the bookkeeping and build these big buildings and to find the money to buy all this furniture and put it in your warehouse and to get just everything that comes with having the business. And he's like, man, I didn't know how to do any of that. I was smart enough to know how to hire someone that did. And that stuck with me forever. And I realized, it's like, you don't have to know all this stuff. You don't have to be as smart as people think. I'm not. But man, I've got a circle around me of people that do know that stuff and are very, very good at what they do. And the 6 people, my upper level managers that report to me are all smarter than me. They're all harder workers than I am. And they're what's made me successful. And so that's the key to it, is understand you don't have to know all this stuff. You just got to hire people and find people that do know. They're passionate about their work. And I've got a great, great group. They're phenomenal. So yeah, I mean, that's all my success is due to that right there. But yeah, I would love to answer any questions or discuss anything I can with anyone that's willing to. They can email me.
Great. Yeah, we'll share that. And was it Mattress Mac who wasn't there some deal where if he it had to do with sports and if you
Yeah.
bought what?
Yeah, he did so I think he's known for placing the largest sports wager in history. And I think there's some pictures of him coming off his jet with a wheelbarrow of cash, but I'm not a gambler, so I don't want to get this wrong, but he does promotions, and he still does them, where he'll say, hey, if the Astros win the World Series, if you come and spend $5,000 at least in my store and the Astros win the World Series, you get it all for free. And then he'll go and place a bet, and there's a word for that. I don't know what that, there's an equal and opposite bet, basically.
Yeah.
There's a term for that, and I can't think of what it is. Anyways, he's protecting himself by betting against himself almost.
Yeah.
And the first time he did it, he won. But so he gave away a ton of furniture, and he does these things all the time. But yeah, I think he's placed the largest sports bet ever. And I don't even know what it is, but millions and millions of dollars. But he's given away a lot of furniture through those too. But yeah, he's a very, very smart person, but similar story. And he's a neat person to research and get to know, and To this day, I mean, the guy's so wealthy, but if you go to his store and you'll see him, and when you leave, he'll text you and make sure that everything's going good. He's very involved and super cool guy, and a local Houston celebrity.
Wow, yeah, and that comes full circle to what you said also about the relationships.
Yeah, super important.
Creativity there at the end with him, doing creative things. I'm sure that was a great publicity getter for him.
Oh, for sure. He's a Houston furniture guy getting national news coverage.
Yeah, yeah, that's wild. All right, well, I really appreciate you coming on the show.
Yeah, I was glad to be here, man.